so much for being here. I'm number 4. My name is Phil. I was lucky enough to be appointed MC, and therefore will be saying a few things, but please know I stand here representative for my 4 siblings. Before turning the mic over to others, I'd like to express 3 gratitudes. The first is gratitude to Michael for capturing the essence of mom, grandma, great-grandma, wife, teacher, friend, and confidant to so many in this room, in this church community, in this city, in this country, in this world, and in the next world. The second gratitude is to those in this room and those not able to be here for a variety of reasons, including my dad, for all your thoughts, prayers, cards, gifts, hugs, phone calls, texts, emails, support, etc. And not just in the last few weeks, but for years and years, you've all been there for my mom and for us. Thank you. My third gratitude is to this building and what is represented for our family. From my memory, and I'm sure I will get fact-checked on this later on, it has seen 5 8th grade graduations, 2 weddings, 7 baptisms, 2 funerals, countless church services, many floor hockey games, including the 4th period, and a huge amount of other church and school-related activities. That's a lot of activity for one family, and what it conveys to me is how prominent mom and dad wanted a spiritual home to be in our family's life. Having their children grow up with a religious-based underpinning was extremely important to them, and we are grateful that they continue to model the tremendous value of leading one's life based on spiritual principles all the way to their ends. Please welcome Michael, who will offer a brief toast to the church.
It's so good to see all your faces. Can you hear me, or do I have to hold it up a little bit closer and closer and closer? I don't know, maybe it's not even turned on.
No, yeah,
Oh, good. The church is the Lord's love in our hearts. The church is the place where we go after we die. Oh, it's called heaven when we leave here and become members of the Lord's church or the Lord's kingdom in the other world. And one of the beautiful teachings of this church is that people from all over the world and with so many very diverse religious beliefs enter heaven because they love the Lord, they love the divine, they love what they understand to be the higher power, and they love each other. People thanked me for my service, and I said, well, I had really great material to work with. I had to cut out so much of what the grandchildren said that I just wanted to include this and that and the other thing, but don't want a minister to go on forever, including right now. But I want to offer a toast to the church and ask you to rise and sing an old traditional song, Our Glorious Church, and it represents our desire to be part of something bigger than ourselves so that we can be better than ourselves. Our glorious church,
thou heavenly bride, Jerusalem restore. Within thy pearly portals open wide, the nations ever shall in light abide, to worship in the open word, the glory of the Lord, descending from the Lord above, thy beauty shall not cease. For in thine inmost shrine that holy dove, the sweet pure spirit of conjugal love, shall dwell forever and increase thine innocence and peace.
Thank you, Michael. Next up is the sibling speech. For this, I will call upon number 2, Janet, and number 3, Keith. Hey, everybody. On behalf of the 5 sibs and the greater family, I am, what do I call myself, guys?
You're the patriarch now.
First son.
I'm the first son, excuse me. That's what I tell all the kids that we came to Mom's house. I said, you just remember he is the first son. Because I am the first in age. That's the only reason why I put boy. Anyhow, I would like to focus on one of Mom's key character traits, her tenacity, strong, and determined personality, which I know all of you have experienced in many different ways. Think of yourself as a young kid around 8 years old, stuck in hospital with scarlet fever for a lengthy stay. My mom built up a lot of resilience during that time because she could not see her parents for many weeks, and no surprise, she became the ward assistant helping other kids. Maybe because of this experience, Mom later on passed the prestigious Guy's Hospital nurses training in London with their extremely tough standards. And then she moved across to England, from England to Canada, as you heard. Michael mentioned rural Britannia. The only thing I'll add is that for us, it became something that was for someone or something the term solid and determined. And for Mom, it became a guiding light for her life. Impressive to think that she started another career as a kindergarten teacher in her late 40s and ended up teaching for 21 years. Funny thing some people would know is that she was not excited about her nameplate on the door. Some of you would know this. She said, I'm Mrs. Gillian Parker. I am not Mrs. Richard Parker, which was the custom at the time. Something that was passed on to my eldest sibling, if I recall, for her career as well. Mom loved teaching so much that in her 50s, she returned to school and earned her early childhood teaching certification. I think she might have been early 60 by the time she finished, which I thought was pretty impressive. Mom had this amazing ability to ask questions to you when she was talking, often at rapid fire. But I truly believe that she really wanted to get to know you, but I appreciate that she could be persistent as a kid and as anybody that she talked to. During COVID, she survived 80+ days in hospital shortly after Dad had passed, which involved 4 surgeries, a Learjet trip, 0 guests, and all the while learning how to use a smartphone, which she had never ever used before. Incredible feat.
And
Now,
5 hospitals.
5 hospitals, yes, that's right. And I do want to do a special call out to my dear Aunts Ursa and Nancy, who consistently called her every other day, and at the same time calling my sister on the off days to keep her going. Apparently some of Mom's dedication was spread to them as well. Mom was well known in her family for her middle of the night walks in her apartment. She loves her toast, which must be buttered all the way around the edge. You don't butter it in the center, as I found in later life. And even with her walker, one night she managed in her apartment to pull over the stove. Who does that? And her last final years at the cottage, which we mentioned, was a special place for our family to connect. But I just want people to understand, those that have not been to our cottage, to get to the cottage, you have to climb in and out of a boat, walk on the dock, walk up a series of stones, around tree stumps, leaning posts, and finally up 5 solid concrete steps to get to the cottage. So not only did she do that getting in and getting out, she continued to do that once a day. She'd come down to the dock and back up. I think it's pretty impressive. In her final days, she kept on trying to leave her bed, even though she could not walk. But she had somewhere to go, somebody to help, and she did not like me reminding her of that. However, she did even put on lipstick and brushed her hair the day that she was her last day on this earth. So I guess she had a plan that I didn't even know was happening. And then just to end, as Michael said, she would say, I don't have a halo on me. And I'd say, Mom, you're an example of someone who is decisive, bold, and makes a difference in so many people's lives. Thanks for all you did for us, Mom. We love you and we miss you already.
Sorry, you get to hear me again.
Yay!
So we're such planners that Keith and I were supposed to coordinate this, but life happens, so we'll see what happens. Okay, we are here today to celebrate our mom and her amazing legacy, her thirst for knowledge and learning that continued throughout her life, and that she shared with her husband, children, their spouses, grandchildren, their partners, and her great-grandson. Mom shared what she knew in her own style with each of her children and grandchildren, tailoring them to fit their personalities. She made connections and met them where they are at, even if she had a lot of questions, and at times was blunt and pointed. In our family, we would say she would tell us like it was. At times, we didn't always appreciate the feedback, but upon reflection, we would begin to understand it came from a good place. Mom was always trying to align what she felt with her morals and compass amidst the ever-changing world. As Mom told one of my brothers just a few weeks ago, you'll repeat it again, you know, I don't have a halo over my head. Traveling was a big part of our parents' world, and they were determined we as kids would see as much of the world as was possible on the budget. Going camping out east one summer through US and Canada, and 2 summers later out west, made for many adventures, but also tight spaces and long stretches of family time, which were bound to have some bumps and arguments. After partnering with Dad, Mom was often the day trip planner once we got to the next place. Mom would collect the brochures, would strike up conversations with the guides and fellow travelers. As our family would say, Mom seemed to find friends wherever she went. Resourceful Mom would find the best places to get the history of the area, where to hike, eat, swim, play, and was looking for any freebies to help stretch the budget. Mom's love of learning and wanting to know led her going back to school at a slightly later age to earn her early childhood education diploma. Mom realized this would need to be a team effort, so my younger brothers were asked to help with meal preparation. Dad did the vegetable shopping at Nob Hill Farms, and I, Jan, was the typist of her papers. Always an adventure, as Mom wrote how she talked in phrases, never full sentences. And her and I had fun editing her papers. Her example of the importance of schooling whenever it would work helped my siblings, and I believe some of her grandchildren, to continue with their education at a time that was right for them. She said it's never too late. Mom's dream job of teaching kindergarten at Olivet School continued to inspire and challenge her love of learning. She shared what she knew with the families, the children, the staff, her wisdom and knowledge from experience, but she also began to learn to appreciate newer points of view and ways of doing things. I was fortunate to go on the yearly field trip to the Toronto Island. Watching her interact and teach her young students was an honor and privilege to witness. When they both retired, Mom and Dad traveled far away to many parts of the world, and when they returned, they would eagerly share all their highlights. Another way they inspired many of us to travel. When my parents were less able to travel as far, Mom and Dad planned local trips to the Toronto Island, James Gardens, Port Credit, Samuel Smith Park, Stratford, driving up to Bell Fountain to see the fall colors, going to see the cherry blossoms at Centennial Park, Westine Park, and of course the Etobicoke Greenhouse. After Dad died, Mom and I would often trek to those places, and Mom would describe exactly how they did each place, right down to what bench they had a target that they were setting their walk to. It was hard for Mom when we had to adjust the distance and time as her body became frailer. Mom found these limitations frustrating as her brain continued to track and move at a much faster pace in her body. I have learned that many saw her walker, and assumed frail body meant frail brain. And I think the medical professionals would be often caught off guard and would say to us, "Sharp as a tack." In fact, 13 days before she died, she was advocating for the window bed in the hospital room, telling the staff that the bed would be free. And they did not agree, but later the staff came back to apologize and said, "Yes, you are telling the truth." I am sure none of you are surprised she got that window bed within 30 minutes of arriving in the room. Go, Mom, go. Mom tried her best to learn the new technology. We'll side quest that later, but cell phones and text to stay in touch. This was definitely a huge learning curve for her. And video chats would at times have views of the ceiling or her hairline, but her friends and family persisted, and she got more comfortable with FaceTime, although I tell you, she felt like she had to do her whole makeup and brush her hair before. She was always quick to tell me whoever had called or reached out. She enjoyed talking with her kids, but it was especially poignant when her grandchildren, great-grandson would call or video, and then she would share it with everyone she knew. She particularly loved sharing it with daily PSW workers and nurses that would come into the house to help her. We're almost done, guys, sorry. Over these past few years, I would ask Mom to tell me about ... And she would share her favorite recipes, her history of growing up, her love of the royal family, her hopes, dreams, her entertaining tips. It has to be done a certain way. Her food shopping tips, her cottage putting trips, her love of tennis, of course. It was her way of sharing her heritage. And yet I was fortunate to get daily in-person visits for the last 4 years of her life. Okay. Mom also taught me about the importance of continuing to learn about your faith and belief in God no matter your age. She read the Bible every night and persisted in reading even the most challenging parts. I guess another challenge, right? Keep going. We discovered there was a book around the study of uncovering the deeper meaning of each line of the Lord's Prayer in Psalm 23. And she reflected that they actually said very similar messages, but in different ways. One of the most profound lessons I learned from Mom was her honesty in sharing with me that patience did not come easy to her. And it was hard when, again, her body would not let her die or do all the things she wanted it to do. How can I be useful, she would say. I remind her about Mr. Fred Rogers' quote, who was a childhood icon for my generation, that everyone is both a giver and a receiver. In either role, each one of us has something valuable to bring. I would tell her that there are new ways to give to others, and it was also her turn to be the receiver, so that I could be the giver, and that it was helping us both work on our patience. As I told her, patience was not my strong suit either. Finally, this is the path I would never have expected. To be roommates with my mom, and that I would have a relationship beyond mother-daughter to one of friend to friend. Bon voyage, Mom. Go visit Dad and go with your God. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet Keith. Our next speaker is someone I know really well. He is number 10 chronologically in the grandchild world. Please join me in welcoming Benjamin.
Hello? Is it on? Okay. I have a whole speech written here, but I'm going to go off book for the first little bit. Because apparently, first of all, how can grandchildren raise their hands if they knew that her middle name was Ava? Because apparently none of us knew until now.
We got one.
At the service. Congrats, Marie. Well done. Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Benjamin. I'm one of Gillian's 12 grandchildren, and I'm honored to be speaking on behalf of our generation today. Now, I'm sure each one of us could come up here and speak for hours about how special our grandmother was, but instead I reached out to my cousins with a request that they share their favorite memories to help me write this speech. My goal is to give you a look into our lives as one of Grandma's grandchildren, a view that the 12 of us were so incredibly lucky to have. Sorry. The first theme that came up was her willingness to be a lifelong learner, well into her later years. You tell me how many other 86-year-olds can get a smartphone dropped off for them while they're in a hospital in a different country during a global pandemic and still take the time to FaceTime each and every one of us. She worked hard to learn about all of our individual interests and hobbies and somehow always knew what questions to ask to get us talking. And it wasn't like she was just talking to fill time. She was genuinely interested in everything that was going on in our lives. As Connor remembers, when he started getting into running, Grandma told him that he was really improving, but winning didn't matter as long as he had as much fun as he could. Similarly, Liz remembers how supportive Grandma was of her singing. She recalls how after singing on Christmas Eve church, she came back to her seat and Grandma gave her a thumbs up and a huge smile. Another theme that came up quite a few times was how Grandma knew exactly when to push us and also when to take her foot off the gas and just listen. Abby remembers a time when Grandpa decided he was going to go down the large blue slide at our cottage And Grandma chimed in, "Don't do it, Richard, it's not worth it." Despite her disapproval, Grandpa still did it, and Grandma decided that stepping back and watching the fun unfold was the best move instead. Religion was another foundational point in Grandma's life. She loved her church and the community that surrounded it. However, she was still always so open and accepting to other people's views and would happily sit down and talk to you about what you thought. Skylar talked about a time where Grandma said to her, "I'm totally fine with you choosing what you want to do for religion, but I ask that when we say blessing you be respectful." A memo Skylar carries with her to this day. Marie remembers how respectful she was of people living their lives differently and how she talked about people being married in their hearts. Now, despite her flexibility on most things, there's a few things that Grandma wouldn't budge on. Despite living in Canada for 65 plus years, she was a proud Brit through and through. And with that came tea. All of us remember afternoon tea at the cottage dock, which always included cookies and muffins. Hayden fondly recalls how she would set up a goal of 20 paddleball hits in a row before we were allowed to get out of the water and have our treat. She also needed her tea to be scalding hot. Well, I, along with many other grandchildren, remember taking her tea into the kitchen to zap it in the microwave multiple times a day. And how could I not mention tennis? Grandma sure loved tennis. Whenever there was a major tournament on, you could count on her watching on the VHS tape that Grandpa had diligently set up to record for her. Grandma also had quite a sense of humor. I'm going to need a microphone holder for this part. Connor remembers when she and Aunt Jan would take out the paddle boat, he asked where they were going. Her answer, Timbuktu. As some of you may recall, Grandpa had a few infamous charade actions. Namely, I'll do it first and see if you can guess. That would be changing a diaper for those that didn't know. As well as antelope. Of course. How could you be so stupid to not know that? Now, Grandma also had her share, namely the belly dancing card. As Natalie remembers, and this is a direct quote from her, "There are no words that can be used to describe your grandmother lifting up her shirt partway and rubbing her stomach." Thank you. I had so much fun writing this. Sometimes, however, she would find herself in some interesting predicaments. Christine remembers when Grandma and Grandpa were supposed to leave from Philadelphia on a cruise, but Grandma misread the date and they showed up a day late to the port. Grandma saw a secondary ship still docked and simply asked if they could get on that one. I've been told the drive home was a pretty quiet one.
I'll tell you the real story.
I also remember a time when Grandma came to Glenview and our street was being paved. She decided that we had to get home, so she pulled right up to one of the workers, talked to him for a minute, and somehow convinced him to move all the machinery out of the way for her to drive on through. Grandma and Grandpa did a lot of traveling, but they never forgot to invite their grandchildren too. Not only did they go to Glenview and Bernathen to visit us, but they also bought timeshares in Williamsburg, Virginia, and Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. We would get to go visit Hilton Head Island on spring break, where we would get up early to watch the sunrise and bike along the beach to Harbor Town and then have a delicious lunch at the Crazy Crab restaurant. Then, many of us were lucky enough to get an extended spring break when we were in 5th or 6th grade and spend an additional week in Williamsburg with just Grandma and Grandpa. We remember going to all the colonial buildings and hearing Grandma explain all the little secrets of Williamsburg she discovered over the years. I remember her having to explain to me how to say Duke of Gloucester Street, even though she had already explained it every day before. Another thing about our grandma was her distinct writing abilities. MW remembers receiving letters and cards from Grandma that he would proudly hang on his wall. When I was going through a time in my life with a lot of change, Grandma took the time to handwrite over 2 pages of reasons to be excited about all the change happening. And 2 years ago, for her 90th birthday celebration, she wrote each child and grandchild a special letter. Though it got hard for her to write, she still took the time to hand sign every letter for us. Last but not least, the cottage. Everyone's favorite place. As they say, all the best memories are made at the lake. Natalie, Marie, Christine, and Hunter fondly remember nighttime thunderstorms at the cottage, where, When they were scared, they would get out of bed and go find Grandma and Grandpa. Of course, a little midnight fudge was needed in order to cheer everyone up again. But that was often followed by Grandma leading them in singing Raindrops on Roses from The Sound of Music until the storm passed. Gray, Connor, and I remember that despite her having a minor fear of jet skis, maybe more than a minor fear, when she saw us pull into the dock on one, smiling ear to ear, she couldn't help but smirk at us and give us a thumbs up. There's so many paddleball games, sometimes with as many as 6 people per side, all waiting for their chance to hit the ball. Natalie remembers when someone hit the ball a little too hard and it landed in Grandma's cup of tea. When Grandma was sitting on her chair in the dock, she would often be wearing her prescription glasses with secondary sunglasses over them, a look only she could pull off well. And when she needed a grandchild to grab something for her, she would often cycle through about 5 names, some of which aren't even in the family, before finally setting on, "You there, George." To this day, I think any of us would still respond to George, if we recall. Hayden recalls how she would be happily annoyed when he would steal 2 or 3 puzzle pieces from the puzzling table and hide them around the cottage. Connor thought of the time last summer when he and I were putting up the roof on the new shed that we had bought. Grandma called us from the porch, telling us how proud Grandpa would be that we were taking care of the cottage, a legacy that he started. All of us remember different times when after a long day of swimming and boating, we would come upstairs and Grandma would wrap us up in a blanket and read us a story sitting on the couch. That's what was amazing about our Grandma. She was someone who you could count on to always be both a friend and a mentor. I think Christine put it best when she said, "Grandma took care of your needs before you realized you needed something." She was brave, funny, caring, a good listener, creative, willing to learn, inspiring, supportive, and a great storyteller. But more than that, she was our Grandma. Whenever one of us would have to hang up the phone, Grandma would leave us with her signature message, "Kiss, kiss, hug, hug." So now it's my turn. Kiss, kiss, hug, hug, Grandma.
Nice work. Good career coming up for you. Thank you, Benjamin. I mentioned the significance of the church, school, in our growing up years. Also very significant during that time was the other church families who chose to live near the church, including ours. Perhaps the most significant of these families were the John and Nancy Winkles, Mom's brother, and the John and Ursa Parkers, Dad's brother. We've asked Erica Winkle and Gwenda Parker Cowley to reminisce about their Aunt Jill and share memories.
Right. Parkers like to talk, as you probably noticed. Can you hear me? There. Okay, so I am Gwenda. I am Aunt Jill's oldest niece. I wanted to put together some ideas about Aunt Jill from the C.J. Parker side of things. We live just a couple blocks away, so our interactions were many. There are several constants when describing her. For example, she always had a Kleenex in her hand, in her pocket, right nearby. Always. She always had water beside her for frequent sips. And she always had funky and interesting earrings, color coordinated with her outfit. I have a picture of her at the beach, and you can clearly see her earrings swinging in the breeze. She was both interested and interesting, a people person. She always was excited about outdoor family outings. I can picture her in her windbreaker jacket, picnic at the ready for hikes, usually with assorted Winkles, Morleys, Schnars, and others, on Good Fridays or Thanksgiving weekend, Ontario Place concerts, Centennial Park, Boyd Park, and Hyde Park. Aunt Jill and my mom made every holiday special and magical. I can clearly remember Christmases with her in that brown blanket kind of dress that she wore every year, wearing a silly paper hat from the Christmas crackers, serving the flaming figgy pudding. I have to mention her frugal nature. I started ironing for her around age 10, once a week for 25 cents an hour. Of course, it was mostly pillowcases and Eric's baby nightgowns at first. I still remember sprinkling them with water as she taught me and rolling them up to dampen them first. She taught me that the way to stretch the amount of tuna from a can was to mix in cottage cheese. She once told me she continued to make her boys lunches when they could do it themselves because she wanted to keep track that they were eating properly. I suspect she was also managing the quantity of consumption. I babysat for their family for years. I don't recall the rate, but I'm sure it was a frugal one. As we got older, the cousins used to chuckle, and still do, about the tiny little wine glasses offered for libation. When Aunt Jill made tea, this must be later than, I don't know when, Aunt Jill made tea, the bag was barely passed through the water, and the same bag was used all day. I recall as a kid, eating dinner at their house, you were allowed to have 1 glass of milk. After that, when your glass of milk, probably powdered milk, ran out, then you can have your same glass refilled with water. I still shudder as I recall it. I remember visiting at the cottage with our first child, and she had set out a little pack of ground beef that was to become dinner that night. Aunt Jill, I gently said, I think this isn't going to be enough for the amount of people here. In the end, she agreed, and I think someone was dispatched to town for more. But she was able to laugh about that years later. She taught us to take care of things. Uncle Rich always had a pile of items waiting for repair on his workbench. Reusing was imperative. And later, when we would come to visit with our own little kids, out came the Fisher-Price castle or the wooden marble game, carefully taken care of while raising her own kids. I adored her flower fairy books and loved to look at them. Aunt Jill loved to make her home beautiful. I and my brothers got hired to wax and shine the hardwood floors in the summers when they were away. I cleaned their house many times. Aunt Jill always had seasonal decorations on the table and loved when there were flowers around. And I think she had a bigger sweet tooth than our mom, because there always seemed to be treats such as Quality Street chocolates. She always had a bag of Hershey's chocolate Shippets in her fridge, which I found fascinating. Aunt Jill was generous. She headed up my wedding reception, and I'm sure some of my sister's weddings too. We sure appreciated the leftover sandwiches from the reception, which she packed up for us as we headed on our honeymoon. There were always birthday cards, and later on Jackie Lawson e-cards, which I enjoyed exchanging with her. She hosted Michael and some of his groomsmen before our wedding, and again, some of my sisters had that experience too. In 2010, our son Jeremy spent 6 months living at 7 Sedgebrook while he attended York University. He remembers how easy it was. Sure, Aunt Jill set out the house rules, but she never interfered in his business. He would help with little jobs and remembers raking leaves at the cottage with Uncle Rich. They never charged him rent. Sometimes he ate dinner with them, but always Aunt Jill left food in the fridge, and Uncle Rich kept the downstairs beer fridge well stocked, which Jeremy enjoyed. At night, he often crossed paths with Aunt Jill. She wandering around sleepless, and he getting a late night snack, and they had conversation. He appreciated Aunt Jill's open-minded. He said she was a feminist. He loved his time spent there. Aunt Jill had a way of making everyone feel special. She referred to her kids, my boys, my girls. It wasn't said as a possessive thing, but that she was proud of them. Her students were my students, she would say. She referred to the parents as my parents and believed it was her ministry to support them. And of course, I got to be the flower girl in their wedding and grew up feeling that special place I held in her heart. In recent years, she would introduce me as such to any PSW or visitor who happened to be there. I still recall the little silver bracelet she gifted me from Burke's, of course. Unfortunately, it fell off one time in the church parking lot and got run over, but she remembered that and we talked about it just a couple weeks ago. Aunt Jill lived larger than life, and I will miss her inquisitive, loving presence.
I'd like to start by thanking my cousins for asking me to speak. On behalf of the Winkles, my name is Erica Winkle, and Aunt Jill was my dad's older sister. Before I begin, I'd like to have a shout out to the role of being an aunt. I was blessed to be surrounded by a plethora of aunts, and it wasn't until I was quite a lot older to realize that some of them actually weren't related to me at all. I've been an aunt for almost 40 years, and it's a role that I hold dearly. Aunt Jill also took her role as an aunt seriously. Gabor Mate says no two children have the same parents, and I think that's very true if you have an aunt in your life. I have some notes from Sarah Morley Gaddy that she asked for me to share, a couple from her girls. Kathleen says, the first time I wore fishnet stockings to church, Aunt Jill came up to me and said, those are bold and racy. And I wish I could have been brave enough to wear those. Annalisa remembers being called Annalisa in kindergarten. Same with my daddy. I remember one day he came home and said, tell me about marijuana. I go off script. Annalisa loved Jill's alphabet puppets that Sarah hung up on the wall at home, and when the dining room was repainted, they all came down, and Annalisa was devastated. Both girls say that Aunt Jill is a riot. Sarah says that Aunt Jill talked a lot, and she talked fast. Yet her ability to tell a story or retell a story was one of her many talents. She would tell it like it was the very first time. She often told me the time when she was staying at our house in the early 60s. One night, fast asleep, she felt a little person climb into bed with her. You see, she was sleeping in one of my brother's beds. She laughed uproariously every time she recalled that event. I stayed with her in January 1965 when Alec was born and when Winston Churchill died. What a week. I remember being taught at the age of 5 how to make her a tea so she could have a hot tea when she woke up from her nap. I don't recall at 5 how I walked down the hall without spilling. Aunt Jill's contribution to my family of origin and my own family will always hold a special place in my heart, and that's from Sarah. All right, back to my scribbly speech here. So Aunt Jill took her role as an aunt seriously. She dropped some pretty hard truths on me throughout my life. And that have actually served me well. When I was about 10, I was playing cards with her, and I had that feeling like I might win. You know, you get that little thing, and she looked me dead in the eyes and she said, nobody is ever gonna let you win. And she said, my father never let me win, and your father is never gonna let you win. She was very matter of fact and stiff upper lip about it, and I remember that moment like it was yesterday. It was both a truth about my dad and a truth about her childhood. And that day I switched my focus from playing games to win and just playing games. Like, they're fun. I still love playing games, and I still actually never win. And I think that is one of the roles of an aunt, to let you know stories of your parents, to let you in on some family truths. In the last few years, these truths came with a frank honesty. I appreciate Aunt Jill's openness to talk about the messiness of life. She told me about her struggles about motherhood and of not feeling enough, of wanting to work because she was actually good at it, about being angry and struggling with her faith, feeling useless after a life of busyness, saying, how is it all going to work out? She asked my sister Gillian and I a few years ago about what we thought about Roe versus Wade. And before we could reply, she told us about her experiences of being a nurse in London. She transported us back to 1952 and the great fog of London, and how she wanted to quit and move home to Colchester. But that's when she learned another hard truth that she passed on, is that winkles don't quit. And she was sent back to London. Since my dad died, I seek out stories of Aunt Jill's early life in England. In our last visit, she told me 2 stories about my father that showed a rather playful side and a little bit of a bratty younger brother side. Before she died, she called me, and she turned that conversation into a quiz. And she was like, asking, so what happened then? What happened then? And I had to replay back to her the stories that she had just told me. I think I got them right, and I think I passed. Speaking of winkles that don't quit, I would like to give a shout out to my cousins. That's the great thing about aunts. They have lots of kids, and then you grow up with all these wonderful cousins. I'd like to give a shout out to my cousins for giving Aunt Jill the best end-of-life care and giving the death she wanted. William Blake wrote, "I will not cease from mental fight, nor shall my sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land." I am so glad that Aunt Jill has given up the mental fight and is finally where she wants to be, in her chosen green and pleasant land, probably in Muskoka, probably in a lake. Thank you.
That ends our formal speech time. You are all invited for lunch, which will be served in a little bit. And thanks so much for supporting Mom, Gillian Parker, and her family. Thank you.
Other things that came up earlier, and I just wanted to make sure each one of the Richard and Gillian Parkers have said there should be a shout out to Janet specifically.
Yes.
And when COVID hit, I don't know if I'll get through this, but Janet stood by, took care, stood by. And then after COVID, and then through these last few years, you've just stood by. And I'd rather be a servant in the house of my Lord than anything else, and you have been a servant in the house of the Lord in serving your mother. So, way to go. God bless you.
Thank you.
That was she.
I think you should.
I did say that, right? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. There'll be lunch served shortly. Please.